All right, so this is homework 7, number 4. I'll just read what it is. Write a C function that returns the average value of the values of a bidimensional array. Read the array values from an input file. The main program calls a function and then displays the average of the value. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to have an input file with a bunch of numbers. The program's going to scan it and then get the average of it. So yeah, and then we'll go to the code. But first, I'll just show the input file. So yeah, we have 30.8, 42.2. Let me just fix this. All right. So yeah, you have an array. It's 5 by 5, and they're all float numbers. Then a few of them are also negative numbers, and I don't think I have a 0, but yeah. Moving on to the actual code, you have include stdio, include stlib.h, then define nr row and nr columns by 5, because as I mentioned before, the input file was a 5 by 5 array.
What is the define to?
Define.
Yeah.
So pretty much whenever I say nr rows or nr columns, it's gonna pretty much tell the code that nr rows is equal to 5. And the reason why I did that is because the input file was 5 by 5. Like if you wanted to, whenever you say an nr row or nr columns, you could have just entered a 5. But I just wanted to make sure I know what I was working with there. So that's why I did nr rows and nr columns.
Got it.
All right, let me just look through the code real quick. All right, so we're going to split it into two parts, the main function and function. I don't remember the correct name for it, but yeah. And since we're dealing with it, we're going to call it average because that's what we want for simplicity. And it's going to be float average because the input file was a float. So you're going to start off with file asterisk ifp, and then you're going to have if ifp equals fopen, and number 4 input.txt. You're going to set it to read mode. It's essentially going to read the input file. All right. Then you're going to have a float for the current value, the sum, and the average. You're going to be using for loop, so that's where the int I and j come in, and int number equals 0. I'll get to what these two lines of code were used in a second. So first off, you're going to have a for loop for I is equal to 0. I is going to be less than nr rows, or if you want, you could just set I is less than 5. But so, but for me, I just stuck to this, so I know like which one is actually it's actually going to scan. And then for j equals 0, j is less than the number of columns, j plus plus. And essentially, while that happens, it's gonna scan the code. The program is gonna do fscanf. It's not scanf because scanf is like a normal like command, right? It's gonna be fscanf because it's scanning directly from a file. So fscanf input file is gonna save it as %f because we're dealing with floats, and it's gonna save it in array ij. So this for loop was just to do for the rows, and this for loop was just to scan for each columns, and it's going to save it as array ij. So that's what this for loop for. It's purely just to scan the float numbers for the input file. Then this for loop is to get the average. So once again, for I is equal to 0, I is less than the number of rows, I plus plus. For j is equal to 0, j is less than the number of columns, j plus plus. Then you're going to want to do the sum of each array, and then you're going to have a number as a counter. So the
What
reason why we
is
had,
what is
you're
plus
saying
equals?
plus equals is pretty much just saying sum equals to sum plus array ij. It's the same thing, but it just saves space and it's much easier to do. Now, the reason why you want to have sum is equal to zero, right, is because because you're going to keep on adding the arrays together. So you have zero equals zero plus, say the array was one, and then because it's a for loop and it's going to keep on continuing to like keep getting new values, right? You have to set sum equals zero. So now the sum was originally zero, so zero plus the array which is one is going to be one, and then you're going to do the next array. So sum is now one, so one plus, say the next array was two. Now the sum would be three, then the new sum is three plus, I don't know, like four. It's
And then you
the
have negative numbers, right? So does that work
Yeah.
too?
Of course it works. So yeah, if I did like negative one, then it'd just become two, and then the sum would just be two. So yeah,
Got
it just keeps on. It's there to make sure it takes the new sum and add it to the whatever arrays next. Without the zero, it's gonna be really wonky. And then you're gonna have number plus plus. It's gonna act as a counter because you're gonna try and find the average of this. So yeah, in short, this for loop was to scan the inputs from the input file. This for loop is to get the total sum of all the arrays, and the number counter, which is to pretty much find out like how many numbers or how many float values were in that array.
Would
And
you be
then
able to do this with only one, like, could you do both in one for loop or no?
you probably can, but I just did two of them just to make sure because I feel like me personally, I would have messed up somewhere doing it with just one for loop. But we can try it out after I showed you this. All right. Then, so yeah, that's the end of that for loop. Then you're gonna have a printf statement where the average of the bidimensional array is %f because you wanted it as a float. Then you could have just done what's it called? Average, something like average equals to sum divided by number, and then initialize average. Or I already initialized average, I forgot. Yeah, you could have done that before the printf, but I was like, but you don't have to. I just thought it would be easier and save like a line of code if I just did the printf with sum divided by number. It does the same thing. It doesn't look as nice as if you just did average, but it still works. Then, so yeah, that was the end of the function code, and then we were going to move over to int main. And because everything's from the input file and you're not really typing in anything from the keyboard, you can just call the function average and it'll work. So let me just execute it, and compile and execute. So yeah, let me pull up the input file. So yeah, the average is 12.601999. And if you calculate it, it's gonna work out. So yeah. And then Ethan, I think you said you wanted to try it if it was all in one for loop.
I
So
just
we can
wonder if
try
it's
it.
possible, but yeah.
It probably is. I could try it right now, just for the sake of it. All right, let me just comment this part out. And then the average was 12 point something, I believe.
12.08 or something like that.
All right, what's wrong here? Unknown type. Oh, wait. Strange.
Wait, what?
Error, unknown type name sum. Did I not have? I have some here. What did I not do?
Oh, there's no sum because you have to comment out the for loop. Line 42, you have to comment that out.
Line 42.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I see. So like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you could also do like that.
Okay.
But as you can see, I messed up just doing that, so I'm just gonna leave it as 2 for loops for my
Yeah,
sanity.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. All right, but yeah, you can do it in one for loop if you want. But yeah, that's how it works. Any questions?
No, I think that's it. I mean,
I think that's good. Yeah. Oh, why did you Sorry, what does average do again in the main function?
Oh,
just
average. What's it called? Honestly, you could have done all of this in the main file, but I wasn't sure how they wanted us to do it. So yeah, they wanted a function, so that's why I made an average function that does everything. So yeah, float average, and then average is the name of the function. Then average, the function does all of this, right? And an int main for average, it's just gonna call the function average and compute everything. So yeah,
So
honestly,
what if you put average again? Like put another average. Would it just do
like
it twice and then over?
like this.
I
Yeah.
think you'd have to have a different, you have to call to a different input file
Yeah,
for it to
Well, would
work.
it print out the same numbers or whatever though?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's doing the same thing and nothing's changed in between. So it's just gonna work the same.
So if you just gave it another input file, you could use it more efficiently basically.
Yeah, I think in the average function, if you put that in the parentheses, if you put like a certain input file,
Yeah, if
you call to a
like
certain input file.
yeah,
I
if you
think.
call a certain input file, you'll probably have to like change the if statement right here a little bit. But yeah,
All right.
actually, I don't think you have to change it. You just have to make sure you're calling the correct input file here. Yeah, but I mean, we already called the input file here, so yeah, it still works. Any other questions?
No, I don't got any more.
All right, I'm gonna end the recording here then.